For my life, I want Larry Joe Bird taking my last shot. That guy from French Lick, Indiana, because he was almost the baddest man. He was right there just a tick behind Michael Jeffrey Jordan when it came to clutch shooting. Game on the line, free throw, three, jump shot, whatever it was, I'll take Larry Bird any day or any night over especially LeBron James.
It in one game. You got to play multiple games.
That's what I'm saying.
Larry Bird looked LeBron James dead in the eye and said it without flinching. "Stop calling yourself the GOAT in my presence." Not in a tweet, not through a publicist, not in some carefully edited interview clip, face to face, in a room full of basketball royalty. And the silence that followed those words was the kind of silence that makes your skin go cold. People who were there say Bird's voice was completely calm when he said it, almost too calm, and somehow that made it land harder than if he had screamed it across the room. Because it wasn't rage, it wasn't bitterness, it was conviction, the kind that doesn't need volume to be felt. And LeBron, he didn't respond, not right away. He sat there, and for a few seconds that felt much longer than they were, nobody in that room made a sound. Now, before you think this is just another chapter in the same old GOAT debate, stop, because this is not that. This is not about stats. This is not about rings on fingers or points on a leaderboard. This is about pride, about legacy, and about one of the most respected voices in basketball history finally deciding he was done staying quiet. And by the time we get to the end of this story, you are going to understand exactly why Bird said what he said, and why a part of you is going to feel like he was right.
Numbers or championships. It was about the way the game was played, how he dominated mentally and physically, and how he could take over a game like no one else. So what do we make of all of this? What do we make of Bird's comments? The GOAT debate might never have a definitive answer. It's subjective, and it's influenced by the era you grew up watching. But when someone like Larry Bird, who played against the greatest players of the 80s and early 90s, says that Michael Jordan was...
To understand what happened in that room, you first have to understand who Larry Bird actually is. Not the legend, not the statue outside the arena, the actual human being who has spent his entire life operating by a code that most people in professional sports abandoned a long time ago. Bird has never filtered himself for anyone, not for cameras, not for front offices, not for the carefully managed world of modern basketball media. People who have been around him for decades will tell you the exact same thing. Larry says what he believes, when he believes it, and he does not lose a single moment of sleep over how it lands. That has always been his way. Even when he was playing, he was the guy who would talk trash to your face, back it up on the court, and then shake your hand and mean it. No performance, no branding strategy, just straight honesty wrapped in extraordinary talent. And here is the thing about Bird that gets lost in 2025. He genuinely believes that the GOAT conversation, in the form it takes today, is disrespectful to basketball itself. Not to him personally, to the game, to the era, to every player who laid the groundwork that the current generation is building records on top of without fully understanding the cost of what came before them. Sources close to Bird say he has felt this way for years, that every season, every curated legacy moment, every interview where the GOAT conversation gets nudged in a particular direction, something in him tightens just a little more, and in 2025, that tension finally found a release.
Season.
Hold on.
Here we go. Favorite stop of media day.
Hold on.
My favorite. Why they always do? I should be the last.
You should be. No.
So I can be happy when I go home.
Here's why.
You guys first, and then I leave y'all, and I got to do all this other shit.
LeBron, I worked too hard on this. The kid from Akron.
Okay.
Our favorite media day leadoff hitter of all time. 50,000 points. The league's all-time leading scorer. 21-time All-Star.
You should see his son do that. Have you ever?
A few months before the private gathering where Bird finally said what he said, LeBron James gave an interview that moved through basketball circles like a slow-burning fire. He was not loud about it. He was not dramatic. That is never really LeBron's style when it comes to these things. He simply sat in front of a camera in early 2025 and spoke about his legacy with the kind of quiet certainty that leaves very little room for interpretation. He talked about what he had accomplished. He talked about what his career represented across generations. And he said, in the way only LeBron can say it, with just enough confidence to make it sound like fact rather than opinion, that the conversation about the greatest of all time had a clear answer. He did not shout it. He did not campaign for it in that moment. He just said it, like it was settled, like the jury had already come back and everyone was just waiting for the official announcement. Larry Bird watched that interview, and people close to him say his reaction was not anger. It was something quieter and more dangerous than anger. It was the look of a man who has held his tongue for a very long time and is starting to calculate exactly how much longer he is willing to do that. The answer, it turned out, was not much longer at all. The event itself was private, one of those off-the-record gatherings where basketball royalty sits together without cameras running and without publicists hovering over every word. Multiple legends were in attendance. The setting was meant to be celebratory, a space to appreciate the game, share stories, acknowledge history. The kind of evening where guards come down and real conversations happen. But even in rooms like that, there are unspoken rules. You keep things respectful. You keep things smooth. You do not crack open the conversations that could make things uncomfortable, because everyone in the room has a relationship worth protecting, and nobody wants to be the reason the evening turns into something else. Those unspoken rules held right up until they didn't. The GOAT conversation came up naturally, reportedly brought to the table by someone referencing LeBron's recent comments. And the response from most of the legends in the room was exactly what you would expect: diplomatic, measured, careful. And then Bird spoke. He did not warm up. He did not ease into it. He started talking about what greatness cost in a different era, about playing through injuries that would end careers today, about facing defenses that were physical in ways the current rulebook would not allow, about winning in environments that were genuinely hostile in ways modern arenas simply are not. He laid it out plainly, methodically, with the confidence of someone who does not need to convince anyone, just remind them. People at the table listened closely. Some nodded. Some went very still. And then, without transition, without raising his voice even slightly, Berg turned and looked directly at LeBron.
What happened in the seconds after Bird said those words is the part of this story that people who were there keep coming back to. Because LeBron James, a man who has spent his entire career knowing exactly what to say and exactly when to say it, said nothing. He did not get defensive. He did not fire back. He did not reach for the statistics that usually anchor his side of this conversation. He just sat with it. And people in that room say the look on his face was not anger. It was something closer to the look of someone who has just been told something by a person whose opinion genuinely matters to them, and they are not entirely sure how to respond to it. That is actually the most revealing part of this entire story, because LeBron's silence in that moment tells you that Bird's words landed somewhere real. Either he respected the source too much to argue, or he was caught genuinely off guard in a way that almost never happens to him. Either way, the most calculated person in that room had no calculated response ready. And Bird was not finished. He kept going. After that initial line, he expanded. He did not make it personal. He did not run through a list of comparisons.
Here is what the aftermath of this story reveals that nobody is fully talking about yet. The fact that this moment happened at all, the fact that Bird said what he said, and the room went silent, and LeBron left early, and people who were there are still talking about it weeks later, tells you something important about where basketball culture stands in 2025. The unspoken rule in rooms full of legends has been, for a long time, that you do not challenge LeBron James publicly or privately, not because he is untouchable, not because he has done anything wrong, but because the structure around his legacy is so carefully built and so powerfully maintained that pushing against it feels unnecessary, like friction that serves no one. Larry Bird does not care about any of that. He is not protecting a brand. He is not maintaining a media relationship. He is not calculating how his words will be received by audiences or executives or anyone else. He is a man in his late 60s who was one of a handful of people alive with the credibility to say what he said, and he simply decided that 2025 was the year he was going to say it. That kind of honesty is nearly extinct in professional sports. The world of basketball in 2025 runs almost entirely on managed messaging, strategic narratives, and carefully placed public moments. The idea of a living legend sitting across from the man at the center of basketball's biggest debate and saying what he actually thinks, with no camera deal, no book to promote, no ulterior motive, is almost jarring in how rare it is. Whether you agree with Bird or not, that part deserves to be acknowledged. And now, here is the question that has been sitting underneath this entire story from the very beginning. What does LeBron do with this? Because if you know anything about how LeBron James operates, you know that silence in a private room is not the same thing as acceptance. His entire career has been built on a very specific pattern. Someone questions him, someone doubts him, someone says something in a room or on a platform that gets back to him, and LeBron channels it, he stores it, and then he performs. He has been doing it since he was 18 years old. He does not forget, he does not dismiss, he metabolizes. So somewhere right now, LeBron James is sitting with what Larry Bird said. He is processing it the way he processes everything, quietly, thoroughly, and with a very clear sense of what he is going to do about it. Maybe it shows up in a game. Maybe it shows up in an interview where the words feel just a little more pointed than usual. Maybe it shows up in a championship run that makes the conversation undeniable. Or maybe, and this is the version that would be most interesting, it shows up in a moment where LeBron says something back, publicly, directly, with the same kind of certainty that Bird brought into that room. That part of the story has not been written yet, but it is coming. Larry Bird has seen everything this game has to give. He competed in an era where the price of greatness was paid in full and nobody handed you anything. He watched basketball transform across decades into something he probably could not have imagined when he was coming up. And through all of it, every change, every evolution, every new wave of players rewriting records, he has never changed who he is at his core. In 2025, in a private room, surrounded by the history of the sport, he looked at one of the greatest players alive and said what he believed, plainly, without apology, without strategy. The GOAT debate is not settled. It was never settled. And the men who are closest to the real heart of it, the ones who played through it, who sacrificed for it, who built the game that everyone else is running their highlights on top of, they have not agreed to let it be settled. Not yet. Larry Bird certainly has not. So here is the question I am leaving with you. Do you think Bird had the right to say what he said? Does LeBron's career speak for itself no matter what any legend says in any room? Or is there a version of this where both men are right, and the real answer is that the GOAT conversation was never meant to have a winner? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me where you stand, because this conversation is far from over, and honestly, the most interesting part might still be ahead of us.